watching Policy and Prejudice. On this holiday weekend, I forgot to come dressed up as Chris Stevenson, okay? And we have a very important guest today. We all know, especially those of us who watch football, several years ago, the most dangerous player in the league was considered to be Michael Vick, and that was all due to his performance on the field. And at that time, Vick was a veteran quarterback of a few years on the Atlanta Falcons, and I remember part of the reason that Vick was considered so dangerous, he ran the 40-yard dash, I think, at 4.2, something like that, and that was faster than most wide receivers. Since then, of course, we've known about the trouble that he's landed into, especially with the dog fighting and the killing of the subsequent killing of numerous dogs, and of course his conviction and sentence in prison. Miraculously, Vick has made a very stunning comeback, and he's back in the league. He's on his third team, Philadelphia Eagles. What's that? Second team, Philadelphia Eagles, and doing very well. Got his endorsement deals, large contract, all that going on. But I've never really read a lot of information regarding Vick, okay, as far as authors are concerned. We have a young man here in Buffalo. His name is Kenneth Robinson. Kenneth just wrote a book entitled Victory, okay? And it's actually called From Vick-tim, very good play on words. From Vick-tim, Vick-tim to Victory, Vick-tory. And the fall and rise of Michael Vick, written by Kenneth N. Robinson, M.S., forwarded by Ron Stewart, Ph.D. What does MS mean?
MS, Master of Science. That's my
Master. This man is a sociologist at University of Buffalo.
Buffalo State.
Buffalo State. I'm sorry.
That's cool.
Educated brother, seems to put together a very informative book, and I just want to welcome you to the show.
Wow. Well, thank you, Chris, for having me.
I should call you Dr. Robinson, but no.
Ken Robinson is fine. I feel like I'm next to Dr. Stevenson. I mean, your contributions to sports literature in our community and beyond is profound and appreciated much. So I'm honored to be here with you. I've read your articles that have appeared in the Buffalo Criterion as well as in the Buffalo Challenger. And so we're fortunate to have individuals like you who are part of the vanguard to ensure that not only our community gets the information that it needs, but that we get it from a perspective that we need. So okay. I'm honored to be here.
The check will be in the mail for that. Anyway, I gotta pay people a compliment.
I mean that sincerely.
But this is, like I said, this book is mind blowing to me. And a lot of the things I didn't get a chance to read the whole thing, but some of the stuff that you talk about. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, thanks for asking. For one, I've been a fan of football, generally speaking, and NFL football in particular, virtually my entire life since the age of 4.
Right.
And so I've always followed the game with a lot of interest. But as I, matured with my understanding not only of the game but our world, I began to look at football differently. Fortunately, that sort of awareness kicked in when the whole Michael Vick dogfighting debacle unfolded. It became fairly obvious that much of the social reaction, the anger, the venom, this Get Michael Vick was way beyond the dogs. It was in far a greater proportion than what harm was done to the dogs. Now, to be sure, I'm not diminishing what he did to the dogs. It's wrong. It was wrong. He broke the law. I got that part. But much of what I saw told me that race was also a fact. This was fairly obvious, especially when it was reported how Vick's life was being threatened, and not just threatened under any circumstances, but very graphic threats for him to be lynched. Right. And so those were, again, indicators that race was a factor. The other reason I felt compelled to not only study this subject a little more closely, but to also write the book was because I could see that there were voids in the discussion
Right.
And when there are voids in the discussion, emptiness, if you will, then there's also voids in the literature.
Now, what do you say as far as, what do you mean when you say void?
Very good. Emptiness, empty spaces, nothing
No opposing viewpoints according to what was already out there.
We were inundated with messages of what he did was wrong, he hurt the dogs, put him away.
Yeah.
But we didn't probe for social factors that might explain why Michael Vick became involved in dogfighting. My research reveals that Vick's indulging in dogfighting was behavior that was socially learned. He learned this in his environment. But what we got from the media was rappers, Jay-Z, DMX, Missy Elliott. They were, showing rap videos with dogfighting in them, and those artists may have in fact did in fact do that. I should add, but. There was also suggestions about his learning this behavior in the Ridley Place projects. Again, while that may have been in part true, those factors didn't go far enough in explaining why he became involved. What I did with my research was to go further, and what I discovered, Chris, was pretty stunning. Dogfighting as a blood sport is a centuries-old artifact of European culture.
Right.
Dogfighting goes back to 5 BC, 43 AD.
Yeah.
You see,
I didn't know that. I knew it went back to maybe as far as slavery or something like that.
Yeah.
But before we go into that,
slavery,
we're going to get it. We're going to examine that.
Sure.
Who did the artwork for this book? This
cool.
Is very
Thanks for
amazing,
asking. Thanks for asking. I agree.
Here.
In fact, the artwork has been a source of a lot of good reviews, to say the least. A young man by the name of Nate Key, who went to City Honors High School here in Buffalo, graduated from City Honors. He actually did the artwork. I had the good fortune of contacting him while I was trying to reach his dad, as I was telling you before.
Yeah.
His dad had artwork on display at Buffalo State, where I worked. And I saw it because I was in the market for an artist to do my cover. I tried to reach the dad. He called me back. He told me, hey, I can do it. And I said, well, let's see your work. I saw his work. We met. He did a phenomenal job. And as I was saying to you before, if you don't mind, what I like about this, and I hope the viewers can see this, is that what Nate captured, yes, please, thank you. What Nate captured was what I was interested in, and that is this sort of this collage of images that would show this cycle that Vick experienced, the from victim to victory, the fall and rise. How despite all that he went through, his downfall, he was able to reclaim his dignity, if you will, and his NFL career.
Wow, now you say Nate from North Carolina?
Nate Key, he's from Buffalo, New York, but he's from Buffalo, but he's currently living in
Nate Key. I know some Keys anyway. Like I said, Jesse Key and people like that. So it could be the same person.
Yeah, his dad's name is Jesse Key, in fact.
Yeah. And he would, and if it's the same family, he's not really the only artist in the family.
Because his dad is an artist.
His dad's an artist. He's got an older brother that's an artist.
That's probably
so. It's very good, very good stuff. But I just wanted to mention this.
Please, I'm glad you did.
This is very good.
Outstanding.
Some of the other stuff that I noticed in this book. Let's go into, like you said, you went to the history of dogfighting. You made a connection also, like you said, you went back to ancient Rome and all that.
Yes.
You made a connection much more relevant to today also, China.
Yeah.
Let's get on with let's talk about this in chapter 3.
Certainly. I'm glad you brought that up because one of the things that alarmed me was the strong reaction from the media. And we talk about networks that partner with the NFL.
Right.
And I don't know if I'm at liberty to mention them on the air. I don't want to cause any conflict with your interest, but CBS, NBC, ESPN, Fox, and others. But those in particular, they're the ones who pay the NFL licensing fees for the rights to broadcast NFL programming and games. Well, while these entities pay the NFL pays China. Because China's TV is state controlled. So CCTV is for China Central Television. So why is that important to underscore? Because China has no laws against animal cruelty. And they kill dogs with impunity. So during the very time in which Michael Vick was being excoriated by the...
That's part of their menu.
Oh, yeah, that's another consideration. I mean, and that's another part of their culture is a delicacy to consume. We consume our part where people eat beef and cows, and I'll come back to the cows too because there's something that's said about the bulldog. It's an important discussion on the history. Okay. Yes,
all right.
But as for China, it's interesting to note that during the same time in which the NFL was tearing Vick apart and the media, his partners were ripping him apart, China had 3 provinces that ordered the slaughter of upwards of 110,000 dogs. You made comment earlier about how Vick had committed these harm against dogs. Also, Vick and his co-defendants were convicted of killing 8 dogs.
Right.
8. China ordered the slaughter in 3 different culling incidents. They call them culling, C-U-L-L-I-N-G, where they gather dogs together and kill them. 3 different provinces, 110,000 dogs. So for every 1 dog Vic was convicted of killing, China's 3 provinces ordered the slaughter of 13,500. That's a disparity of gross proportions, to say the least. But nobody's asked the NFL to explain how is it that you continue to do business with China despite the fact that you stopped doing business with Michael Vick for what he did to dogs.
Right.
And here's what's interesting, Chris. China doesn't just kill dogs without reason. They kill dogs because, in their estimation, dogs represent what's referred to as a bourgeois affectation. And I'll explain what that means to the viewers and listeners.
All right.
When we hear this term bourgeois, we think about capitalism, because in the whole idea of being bougie, you know. So dogs are a reflection of middle class culture in the West, generally speaking, and particularly in America. Historically, in France, dogs and cats were symbols of middle class culture, even in America. Now check this out. When American suburbia was created, this was the most phenomenal example of quote-unquote middle-class culture and life in America, the development of American suburbia. Well, during this time, which was after World War II, suburbs were being created. Many veterans who had fought in World War II on behalf of the United States, which helped lead the Allied forces to victory over Germany, Nazi Germany, well, we situated them in American suburbs. The Veterans Administration, along with the Federal Housing Authority, came up with lending programs to help situate and help veterans transition to American, civilization as they knew it prior, but in a whole new development. Why is that interesting? Because in 1949, Communist China comes into existence as this very poor agricultural nation, where these peasant farmers are trying to build themselves up. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the United States is celebrating its victory, its leader as a military power, its leader in industry, and now we have these American suburban communities coming to play. Why is that important? Because in China's view, the dog represents a bourgeois affectation, because the idea being, if you can afford to feed another mouth and it happens to be a dog, then it suggests you're doing relatively well in the economic system of capitalism. So Chinese people and culture resented this aspect of American culture. So they've always harbored an aversion or this disdain toward dogs. They always have. When they kill dogs today, they're sending a not so subtle message to their citizens. Don't get it twisted. Okay, you may use this dog as a pet. We tolerate it minimally, but don't get any fanciful ideas about trying to persuade us to become a democracy because of this dog being a reflection of Western culture and the economic system of capitalism like that which exists in America. And here's what's interesting about what China did. In those 3 separate killings, where dogs were killed as they were, they ordered their citizens, you either kill your own dog or we're going to kill it for you. And if we got to kill your dog, we're going to fine you for it. So they went through in 2006, went through a province and offered the residents 63 cents to kill their own dog. But if they didn't, they would kill it themselves. And the other 2 incidents in 2009, which was right after Vic was released from prison, 2 other provinces did it. That's where the other 60,000 came from. And in that case, in those instances, they told the citizens, you will kill your own dog, or we will kill your dog for you. We will fine you and make you watch as we kill your dog. Again, these are not so subtle messages to let their citizens know we don't appreciate you trying to flaunt this bourgeois affectation. This term affect speaks to impression. You create an impression that it's okay to have dogs, and we got poor peasant farmers still in China. They're poor peasant farmers, and so they didn't appreciate it. Again, let's bring this to a head. This is important to underscore because in 2007, the very time in which the NFL was ripping Vic apart in the media, the league was planning to play the first of its kind China Bowl to involve the New England Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks. You're telling the world that Michael Vick is no good for what he did to dogs, but you're about to go play a game in China? Nobody asked him to explain.
Amazing.
In 2009, Vick gets released from prison. 2 other provinces ordered these slaughters, as I said, and we said nothing. But here's the kicker. If the NFL is America's game, the question becomes, why are they still doing business with China? That game was never played in China. The reason why? Because Chinese people don't like football. To them, it's too violent. Now, they like basketball, LeBron James, soaring through, dunking, shooting jumpers, that they can take. But they don't like to see people being picked up, thrown to the ground. In my book, I argue that for them, perhaps it's too reminiscent of confrontations with the state if they offer resistance. So that China piece is important. It's big and it's significant.
Well, we had 2 opium wars that we started against China.
Yes.
Based on 2 completely corrupt reasons.
Okay.
So like a lot of that probably comes into their mind.
That tension is there. That underlying tension is there.
Yeah,
no doubt about it. And they understand the trade for the the opium for the gunpowder. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And that's what we did. We offered them gunpowder so they can create munitions or weapons, and then they gave us opium.
Yeah.
And they didn't give it.
They were using gunpowder for festivities.
Hey, and then
we say, "Oh no, you can kill people with this. Let us
Exactly.
use it." And if you don't, we're going to start a war. We'll declare war
over it.
Mm-hmm. Over your stuff. Over your stuff.
It's amazing.
So it is amazing, and that's an incredible tying that you did, because all of that was completely over my head.
Tell me about it. And lastly, on China, I would add this, Chris. Not only have these incidents occurred in terms of dogs being gathered and killed, but it's also worth noting that because there are no laws against animal cruelty, millions of dogs are killed every year in China for the illicit fur trade.
Right.
Again, this is important to underscore. Half of all fur coats purchased in America are made in China, and investigators have found that the labels are being switched. So again, what if in my view, and I asked this in my book, if the reaction to Michael Vick was not about race, then the question becomes, where are all the dog lovers at on the NFL doing business with China? Despite the fact that it kills dogs, not without reason, but because dogs represent in their minds a bourgeois affectation. That is a symbol of Western culture and the economic system of capitalism like that which exists in America. Thank you.
That's amazing. Now, like you say, going back a little bit further, you mentioned Chicken George.
You saw that.
Okay, from Bruce, which is a fictional character based on a lot of reality characters. Black slaves trained to pit chickens or dogs or whomever against each other for the entertainment, for white entertainment.
Yes.
Okay, there were no blacks in there. Black slaves said, "Well, I sure want to see some dog fights tonight."
That's the truth.
that was for the entertainment of white people, who also we've seen clearly in Django, black slaves also fighting each other. Okay.
Yes.
But go into some of that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a very important piece. I do, in fact, identify Chicken George as an illustration of how, and of course we talk about Chicken George, who was a character in Alex Haley's epic book Roots, and it was, of course, was an ABC miniseries back in 1977. But on the point, if we recall, if the viewers and listeners can recall as we do, George essentially established his value as a slave because he was able to train chickens to fight and kill for the benefit of his master. And in fact, in the storyline, a Englishman in the movie came to the part of America where George was and actually purchased him because his own master, who was played by Chuck Connors, was falling on hard times. And so, in fact, he was losing. And so he wound up taking George to England. He began to train chickens there, ultimately won his freedom. But these historical artifacts are unique because they show that slaves were involved in training animals for fighting, whether it's chicken fighting, cock fighting, or dog fighting. In my research, I found several sources that note that even going back to Louisiana, one noted that in Cajun culture, blacks and whites were fighting dogs for over 200 years. Right. And that among the cultural experiences, even in Louisiana again, in the Congo Square, they would get together for Creole dancing and dog fighting. But moreover, when the fighting pit bull, as we know it, came to America, blacks were still slaves. It came over in the early part of the 19th century, as early as 1817. Now, here's what's interesting. We talk about the history of dog fighting in Europe. Right. Well, the English bred the bulldog. This is a very important discussion point. Okay. The bulldog, for the express purposes of taking down bulls. See, historically, dogs would fight human beings, bears, bulls, etc. Well, the English wanted a more fierce fighter, so they bred a bulldog with the wider head and larger jaws to be able to grab the bull by the nose or lip and pin him down. You see, this is a part of this parent culture that I was talking about that Vic learned from. Why? Because this aspect was very important to the English economy because when dogs would attack bulls, it would tenderize their meats for later human consumption. But on the point, the English were so impressed with the bulldog's fighting prowess that the animal became their national symbol. Queen Elizabeth I, who ruled from the late 16th century on into the 17th century, used to attend dog fighting matches with great fanfare and would host dignitaries as well. That's how endemic dogfighting was as a part of English culture. But here's the point. Here's the question. Did the English's use and adoption of the bulldog as their national symbol influence American culture? But of course it did.
Course, yeah.
Upwards of 300 high schools, colleges, universities use the bulldog as their mascot. Last night I was watching a highlight where Burgard faced Alden. Both teams, the nickname is the Bulldogs. Now, I'm not criticizing these schools, but what I'm criticizing is our culture. Yeah. Why didn't we have a broader discussion? Why didn't we challenge high school students and college students to have a discussion about institutions using the Bulldog as their mascot? Yeah. When, in fact, they use the Bulldog as their mascot expressly because of the dog's reputation earned in animal fighting.
Well, what this media hype, like you said, the Get Vick syndrome, it blocked a lot of that out.
So
a whole lot of it. Okay, here you got a much wider issue where you could have let people know about the history of it, and you missed it completely because you're just happy because you got another black man, another scandal involving a black celebrity or a prominent athlete.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes. And
so as a result, tens of millions of people don't learn anything, and they're happy just to go along with this Get the Black Man program, you know. And my thing is, here's another thing. We all talked about, you know, the history of animal fighting and dog fighting and everything. There was no SPCA or PETA back then, back in those slavery times or the Roman Empire or anything.
No.
They wouldn't have lasted long anyway, all right? What happened to animals? What happened to animals that were on the losing end of those fights?
Oh, no doubt. It's a very good question. Very good question, Chris. Because it goes to this idea about the parent culture and the subculture. Because when I trace this historically, I not only offer a historical perspective, but also a theoretical perspective. And I talk about the subculture violence theory, which is chapter 1. Right. The subculture violence theory is an explanation for Michael Vick's involvement in dogfighting. Well, to answer your question, what happened to the underperforming dogs? They killed them, just like Michael Vick did.
Right.
This goes back centuries. So the conduct norms that bridge the parent culture to the subculture are the following. A, baiting, which is to use other animals to entice the other dogs to attack. Vick engaged in baiting. The whole idea of using a bulldog to attack the bull involved baiting. Okay, it also involved killing underperforming dogs. And the other important conduct norm was betting. They would gamble on these expeditions, these fights. And so here it is, exhibitions I meant to say. They would gamble on these exhibitions, but that's the point. Vick demonstrated behavior that was centuries old in terms of conduct norms. That's important. Marvin Wolfgang, who studied black Philadelphia, well, let me reframe that, blacks in Philadelphia, studied inner city blacks, found that the violence that they exhibited was only partly different from the parent culture. Yeah. That's why I use the subculture violence theory, which ironically enough studied blacks in Philadelphia, which is the city where Vick resurrected his career. And so Wolfgang found that. Said the violence exhibited by blacks is only partly different from the parent culture. So Vick's involvement in dogfighting, I trace it back to a parent culture that goes back to Europe. And that parent culture is not only observable in those conduct norms, betting on dog fights, killing underperforming dogs, and baiting, that whole process, that unfolded. But beyond that, these episodes are clear. History has recorded them. And the more we examine them, the better we'll understand this phenomenon. And I will add lastly about the other conduct norms, dogfighting organizations. The United Kennel Club, the American Dog Breeders Association. These organizations established the pit bull as the standard for dogfighting. Here's what else is interesting. The American Pit Bull Terrier Association. These are dogfighting organizations that preceded Michael Vick's own Bad News Kennels. So when we start talking about a parent culture influencing the subculture, there is another indicator of it. And then I will add this lastly. In terms of this parent culture and subculture, the English took the bulldog and crossbred it with the smaller, quicker terrier dog, which created the Staffordshire Terrier, which was imported to America in the 19th century when blacks were still slaves, and then it became the American Pit Bull Terrier. So therein is another connection between the parent culture and the subculture. So when we start talking about 300 schools, Yale University, Georgia University, Georgetown, all use the bulldog as their mascot. None of those academicians came out, these so-called intellectuals, and said, wait a minute, let's have some sobriety here. We're all intoxicated with anger and hate. Get Michael Vick. We are institutions who use the dog fighting history to celebrate and to bring in revenue. Yeah. Georgetown University. Now I'll let you
Georgia
proceed.
Bulldogs.
The Georgia Bulldogs.
Like you said, Georgetown University.
Georgetown University. Listen, a Catholic university.
Yeah.
Is it peculiar that a Catholic university would have a dog that's associated with dog fighting as a mascot? Not peculiar at all. Why? Because back in England centuries ago, the church used to host dog fighting matches as fundraisers. and I'll stop there and let you
You
proceed
just
with the next question.
the Catholic Church,
Pardon me?
the Vatican.
Oh my goodness!
Come on,
listen.
Come on.
The two main authorities in England, the king, the monarchy, and the church, both participated in dogfighting.
And the Vatican and Rome didn't stop them.
And Rome was an epicenter for it. We talked about between the Britons used to clash.
Yeah.
But even though the Romans would prevail, they noticed that the British dogs were more fierce fighters, so they began importing them. And when they began importing them, they would host dogfighting matches in the Roman Coliseum.
Good Lord.
Yep.
Well, let's go into talk about labeling and delabeling. And Howard Becker, the Howard Becker novel, as you talk about. This is very interesting stuff. People, you have got to get a copy of this book.
And then, if I may, Chris, interject a point, because you mentioned about race, and that's very important about how they went after Vic and the racial component. My study shows, and I conducted a data analysis using arrest data that is documented and warehoused at petabuse.com, and they found that in the 5 years preceding Michael Vick's home being raided, and in the 5 years that followed, the number of African Americans arrested for dogfighting increased fivefold. From you saw that?
I saw that.
Yeah, from 64 5 years prior to 306 5 years thereafter. Whites, on the other hand, was 44 5 years before, 94 5 years thereafter. And for Hispanics, was relatively nominal, pretty insignificant. 9 5 years prior, 15 5 years thereafter. That's important to underscore because it shows you how, as you pointed out, there was this attempt to identify Vic as this deviant, and that goes to a great segue to the discussion about labeling versus delabeling.
Oh,
Please.
Yeah. Because I just want to get into that to a certain extent. Sure. I remember people, especially we had dog fights here in Buffalo. Nobody made a big thing of it, but I knew there was a little dog fighting ring going on and everything.
That's the truth.
We all knew that, but nobody made anything of it.
You make a good point because go ahead, please.
Before, like I said, but after Vicks, even I never thought of it would increase the way your statistics brought up.
Oh my.
5-10 times what it was before.
5
and
times.
Still they targeted, they profile. It's dogfighting profiling.
Certainly.
If they went after, because Southern whites are doing this, the whites out in the rules and everything.
Oh, no doubt
they
about
do the same
it.
thing.
There's no doubt about
I think
it.
Brett Favre even said something about that.
Oh, no.
You
hit the hammer on the nail. You hit the hammer on the nail. And
Yeah.
that goes, what you said is critical. And I want to come back to the labeling piece because what you just pointed out is meaningful. You're right. And that's where the media twisted it and mangled it very badly to target blacks. Michael Vick's involvement as a child was pretty primitive, informal. It was not the formal, organized dogfighting that he got in trouble for as an adult. Instead, the dogfighting he was involved in was in a rural community. Michael Vick wasn't fighting dogs on the street level. All the law enforcement and media attention and animal rights groups like the Humane Society for the United States of America and PETA, people for the ethical treatment of animals, they turned their attention to street fighters. But Vick's involvement was on the level of a professional fighter, where significant cash purses are at stake, $20,000, $30,000. Professional dog fighters are very secretive. There's a high premium placed on that sort of caution. Hence, Michael Vick, the most visible player in the NFL, if you will, had $60 million in endorsements, the highest paid player, $130 million contract, yet nobody knew he was involved in dogfighting. That underscores how secretive he was, and he was more involved as a professional fighter. Street fighters, on the other hand, fight on the street level. They're going to be in vacant apartments, putting dogs and starving them and putting 3 of them in there and letting them fight for a bag of food till they're dying in, or placing them in trunks, trunking. Michael Vick wasn't involved in dogfighting on that level. Moreover, people who fight on the street level often commingle that criminal behavior with other criminal deviants, i.e. drug dealing, gang activity. Their arrest records reflect it. Vick's only sanction from the law prior to this was a traffic ticket. So it goes to this idea about labeling. When you have this race, you have race and deviance as constructs, and we use that to build a set of ideas that he's bad, he's black, and then look at how they treated him on the field, like you said. He was referred to as dangerous, reckless, black quarterback. Running quarterback, athletic quarterback. He was treated as a deviant, given how he played on the field. So how much can a guy internalize about being cast as a deviant, given how he played on the field, before he demonstrates this deviance off the field? One of the perspectives I argue, and this ties into Becker's sequential model of deviant behavior, is that if you believe a situation is real, then it's real in its consequences. That's from W.I. Thomas. Vick came to believe he was this deviant. He came to believe that no matter how he played the game, he was always written off as this sort of anomaly, that you're not conventional, you're not what we prefer. And I believe this began to play on his
Right,
mind.
right.
So consequently, he takes disagreeable characters that he grew up with, he keeps them nearby. And I argue this in my book, especially in chapter 7. He had these individuals around him because he realized no matter how much the media tears me down, these guys are going to lift me up. They're going to tell me, you Vic, you all that. So he trusted them. So when they tell him about this dogfighting ring, he finances it. Michael Vick didn't benefit from the dogfighting ring. We know that. The guys who benefited from it were the ones who he was carrying, who he was providing a lifestyle for. So he was totally exploited by this whole process of negative labeling, where he bought into these negative ideas about who he is and what his football skills amounted to. Now we look at a game today where everybody's looking for that next Michael Vick type, who's the dual threat to pass and run. Very interesting. But yeah, thank you for bringing it up. Howard Becker's sequential model of deviant behavior is important in underscoring how...
To me, it was like, it's programming and deprogramming.
Exactly.
Okay? And as far as how you know, because when these issues come up, it's just like what it was with OJ.
Yes.
I saw the media invent. We know OJ, especially in Buffalo. What you see after that is the media, the powerful white media, in other words, invent an OJ that is different. Okay, I can know you. I'm just meeting you face. I mean, I've seen you before.
Right,
I'm
likewise.
just talking to you face to face. There is a real you that you have known over your years, and other people know.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
You become a national figure, you do something wrong, they're going to create a Kenneth Robinson that is evil, vile, and has always had. You start wondering about yourself.
Wow.
Am I really that bad? Yeah, he's bad. He did such and such. Blah, 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 blah. Okay.
I couldn't agree more.
So
I couldn't agree more.
That is the labeling and the programming, all right, that goes into it. We've seen that to the hilt with Michael Vick, and concurrently, while this was going on, as you mentioned in your book, other people have been doing wrong. Other athletes, Ben Roethlisberger,
certainly.
Pat Freeman and I have talked about this numerous times on the network. Where here's a guy with 3 rape convictions, 3 different women, I think.
With two very serious allegations in a span of 9 months, no less.
In the span of 9 months,
and he wasn't convicted
and
of either.
He was not convicted,
not even charged.
And this is a white guy attacking white females.
Interesting.
That's what got me. It wasn't that he didn't. This wasn't black. He's doing this to white females. Yeah. People, and I've gotten to so many arguments on Facebook, especially regarding this. Okay, because people will say, "Well, I'm not going to watch that game tonight, Monday Night Football, because Michael Vick. I'm still mad at the Dogs." I said, "Well, so you're not going to watch the Pittsburgh Steelers? Okay, are you mad at Roethlisberger?" Well,
that's interesting. You absolutely.
But it's true. I've caught so many people red-handed. With their hands in the race cookie jar, so to speak.
Tell me about it.
Okay, and you bring this out very clearly in your book, but
it was very different the way it was treated. I cite a report by ESPN, and they typically sometimes ESPN is off the mark, but this one particular program, Outside the Lines program, hosted a national town meeting in the New Ebenezer Baptist Church, which of course was a church that historically had been pastored by the late great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So they hosted this event on the night that was commemorating his birthday, January 2011. But on the point, there was a very interesting study that they shared that showed that the media coverage of the Vick scandal was the least kind. Conversely speaking, the media coverage of the Roethlisberger scandals, plural, was the most kind. And to further show that race was at work, they also presented data that showed that the media coverage of the Barry Bonds scandal over the performance enhancement drug use was the least kind. But the coverage of Roger Clemens, who was similarly assailed for his use of performance enhancement drugs, was the most kind. We know that in looking at those 4 athletes, only the 2 blacks were convicted. The 2 whites were not. Roethlisberger was never charged.
Right.
Roger Clemens was acquitted.
Yeah.
And see, but yet Vick wound up pleading guilty to his harm to dogs. Roethlisberger never charged for his harm to women, as they were alleged to have occurred. And what's really interesting, and of course Roger Clemens, he was acquitted, but Barry Bonds had to plead guilty to obstruction of justice. You see, some conviction, talking about race and deviance in sports. Yeah. But what's even more revealing about the Roethlisberger scenario is how the law enforcement reacted. Like you said, now had a black athlete or quarterback allegedly sexually assaulted a young white girl, highly unlikely the prosecutor would decline to pursue charges. The prosecutor in the case said he wasn't going to do it in the investigation because he didn't believe he could get a conviction. I quote Dave Zirin, who's a critically acclaimed author and attorney, who said that, and here I thought, I quote him, he said, here I thought that was a judge and jury's a decision as to whether or not they can get a conviction. But the lead investigator says, I'm not even going to pursue it. The lead law enforcement official who was supposed to be investigating it was taking pictures with Roethlisberger and even demeaned the alleged victim. So he wound up having to resign. So you get a whole different social reaction. Not only did we not deal with Roethlisberger appropriately, he wasn't even charged with serving alcohol to minors. He should have been charged with endangering the welfare of minors. They charged Michael Vick's brother. He was convicted of that. He was riding around joyriding with alcohol in the car. He had to plead guilty to endangering the welfare of minors. Roethlisberger wasn't even charged, wasn't even criticized for that. And then also, Chris, he reportedly held up a drink, and while he served these young girls alcohol, reportedly said, and I'm going to use a word that we don't typically use on the radio, but one that's is a part of the vocabulary nonetheless. He said, all you bitches take my shots. Now, we know a B-I-T-C-H is a female dog. We don't use that language to refer to human beings. But that's what he held up a drink. That's what he said to these young girls. Had off-duty Pennsylvania state troopers guarding the door. They were his bodyguards. Took the young girl in the bathroom, assaulted her, allegedly assaulted her. Let me say that, allegedly assaulted her. And I'm saying allegedly because it was never proven. Although the young girl was examined and she was found to have a laceration.
There are testimonies, court documents that I've seen of two of the girls. Okay, very descriptive. Two separate incidents, two girls that never met each other. Okay, this guy had a modus operandi.
Yes.
Okay, and that was amazing to me. One more example of this is one more individual that came out, that one more scandal of a white celebrity, so to speak, that happened, or sports celebrity that took place around the time of Vick, was Bill Belichick.
The Spygate.
Here's a guy, he's spying on other teams.
Right. Illegally.
Illegally. Okay. That is so wrong on so many levels.
Yes.
And it directly affects even somebody on the team had talked about that later on. They said this is how it worked. Because what happened then, a lot of fans around the league said, it doesn't really matter,
right.
It didn't really lead to anything. No. Whenever, if you're a quarterback, you're a football team, and you know through your helmet radio what the defense is going to do before they do it. You already got an offense ready for it.
That's the truth.
And people don't. This is from their first Super Bowl victory, right down to the last. And see, a lot of people don't understand this because even if he stopped doing this a few years ago, you know the other team well enough. You know their habits by now. Right. To pretty much have a
certainly
to have a general concept of how they think. All right, and that's it. So he calls out a signal. The other team does not know what you're going to do, but you know what they're going to do.
Exactly.
Okay, and and people excuse this and wave this away. This does not get to be on a scale, a scandal on the grand scale of the Michael Vick thing. But like you said, that breaks federal law.
Certainly.
Also.
Certainly. And that's the part that was wrong about it.
Sure.
In fact, I argue in my book in chapter, I deal with this in chapter 2. I compare Vick to Roethlisberger and Vick to Belichick, Vick versus Spygate, as I call it.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind, of course, as we know, in 2007, when the Vick dogfighting scandal broke out, Belichick's Spygate scandal came to light after it. In fact, it was the season opener when NFL security noticed there was this videotaping taking place. Now, I happen to believe that they were tipped off because Eric Mangini was the opposing head coach that day, and Mangini used to coach under Belichick. So I believe that. Here's what's interesting. The NFL sent a letter to every NFL head coach, including Bill Belichick, before the opener, warning them against illegal videotaping procedures and rehearsing for them what is acceptable and what is not. Belichick still broke league rules, and I argue in my book, perhaps even federal laws. Because when you engage in a conspiracy, see, the NFL is regulated by Congress as interstate commerce. That's why, as we know, the NFL and AFL was allowed to merge because Congress gave it an exemption from antitrust laws. Otherwise, the two of them coming together would have operated a monopoly, which they have, which they do, and of course it would have prevented other professional leagues from competing, which we know nobody's been able to compete with them. USFL made the strongest stand, but they didn't have the TV revenue to compete. But on the point, this was an issue. I argue in my book that the media, in a very negative, very racist way, used Vick's dogfighting scandal to push Belichick's Spygate scandal off the public's radar. By the time mid-season and beyond, by December, Vick had been sentenced to prison. Belichick would be the Associated Press NFL Coach of the Year, despite the fact that he engaged in this illegal videotaping technique. I argue that he not only broke federal laws, perhaps, but that his behavior may have even risen to the level of wire fraud, using a sound instrument, in this case video, to steal signals and then to use that in a manner to defraud, in a scheme to defraud and to undermine fair trade and competition. He did all that, and he used interstate facilities. NFL stadiums are interstate facilities. Those are all elements that are tied into wire fraud. But when it came to Vick, Congress was up in arms. Get him, he's no good. We had congressmen from California, from West Virginia, all calling for him to be punished. When it came out of Bill Belichick, the only senator or congressman to speak up was Senator Alan Specter out of Pennsylvania, who was concerned, of course, because the Patriots beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl. So that was part of his concern. But he was the only one to raise a question about Belichick's action. And here's what's interesting, too, about the league, the NFL, Roger Goodell, and his double standards by race. He sent security personnel from the NFL to help state investigators who were combing through Vick's property looking for evidence during the dogfighting investigation. So the league helped to implicate him. But when it came to Roethlisberger, they didn't send their security to help investigators in Millersville, Georgia, nor in the Vegas incident. Remember, because not only did Roethlisberger have this incident in Georgia, Millersville, Georgia, but 9 months prior, he had an incident that was reported based on the Vegas scenario, where the hotel worker said he asked her to come to his room to see what's wrong with his TV, and according to her, he sexually assaulted her. And as you said, and Dave Zirin points this out, that the parallels were so similar between what the two women reported that Zirin surmised, as you did, that, as he put it, he said, either the Millersville college student is a sociopathic genius, or, like you know, that Roethlisberger has a modus operandi when assaulting women. But to fast forward to Belichick, in his case, the league didn't send his security to investigate him. They ordered the tapes to be destroyed. Goodell sent his security to destroy those tapes. And he said, according to him, well, I don't want other teams to benefit from it. Well, you just said that Belichick didn't benefit from it. So if Belichick didn't benefit from it, what do you worry about other teams for?
Exactly. Well, you know, I don't have the luxury of committing a crime and having law enforcement destroy the evidence.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it.
And I'm talking through personal experience.
I got it. I hear you.
And you know, I don't know what.
None of us do. Neither do I.
Exactly.
We don't have it like that.
But Belichick and Roethlisberger have that.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it. Yeah, and then when we talk about issues like race and deviance, people think it's the race card. It's not the race card. It's the reality card. And I would add one other point about the Belichick scenario as it pertains to the league and the law. When this happened and it unfolded, the league came out, Roger Goodell said, well, they didn't benefit from it. The only people who have raised questions about whether Spygate benefited, well, let me rephrase that Belichick benefited from Spygate and won those Super Bowls have been African-American athletes. James Harrison, who's now with Cincinnati, he raised the question. How is it that they were 3-0 in Super Bowl play before Spygate was exposed, 0-2 thereafter? My examination of it reveals even more. In their last 5 playoff losses, Chris, and that dates back to even as recent as last year. Last 5 playoff losses, the Patriots lost to teams that they faced during the regular season. Twice to the Giants in the Super Bowl, twice to the Ravens in the playoffs, and once with the Jets. Yes, that's it. 2 times to the Giants, 2 times to the Ravens, once to the Jets. In each of those seasons, when they lost to those teams, they faced them during the regular season. Why is that important? Because before Spygate was exposed, they could have did as you said. They could have engaged in this illegal videotaping, stolen signals, and used them to gain a competitive advantage in the next matchup. Because they didn't have Spygate, they lost. That's more than a coincidence.
And that's more than a coincidence. In the case of the Jets, who was the division rival.
Exactly. Who they had faced twice.
They should have known. They should know what the Jets are going to do anyway.
You would think, right?
All right. So Spygate, not having Spygate makes a big difference.
Certainly.
You know what I'm saying? Not having, and it gives them momentum. Even though they're not winning Super Bowls, they know how to get there.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just it. But in terms of, in a game of inches, in a game where a couple of plays can make a difference, it appears as though that this illegal videotaping technique benefited them. Period.
Yeah.
They could talk about how much a roster's turned over. One thing that hasn't turned over about that roster is that Tom Brady's still a quarterback, Belichick's still the head coach. That's why they won those other 3 Super Bowls. So let's not get it twisted.
Exactly. Let's talk about the charts also. Like you said, these charts here, and because I know you talked about before the arrest, they were the black arrests were black 64, whites 44 for dogfighting. After the Vicks incident, black arrests for dogfighting 306, white 94, just 94. People, this here you're going to see a more clearer version of this, but these charts are they're off the chart. They're off the chain.
It's revealing, very revealing. I'm glad you paid attention, caught that, Chris. And it is amazing because here it is that blacks saw their arrest rates for dogfighting increase nearly 5-fold in the 5 years before Vick's property was raided versus the 5 years thereafter. So we look at the period that precedes April 24th, 2007. Okay, and I'm sorry, the 5 years that precede April 25th, 2007. That's when Vick's property was raided.
Right.
And then subsequent to April 25th. So I look at the 5 years before and the 5 years after. And the data is stunning to see that African Americans saw their arrest rates increase nearly 5-fold. Conversely speaking, whites saw near 1-to-1 and Hispanics from 9 arrests to 15. That's stunning. But what's even more revealing is the rates of conviction. African Americans saw their rates increase by 7%. Whites saw their rates decrease by 12%. And so this is also very, very revealing about how there was a shift. And what is really notable is that a lot of these arrests occurred after Rush Limbaugh recorded his public service announcement for the Humane Society. He recorded right before Vick was released, if you recall.
I'm glad you mentioned Limbaugh. I was going to get
Yes, oh my God. He's a trip, right? We know that.
Yeah.
But what happened, was after Vick was released from prison. In fact, before he was released from prison, he had agreed to work with the Humane Society. That was part of the reason why he was able to get back in the league, to lobby against dogfighting and educate the community about dogfighting. He's done all that, and he's still the most hated player in sports, right? How about that? But on the point, Limbaugh knew that Vick had entered into this partnership with the Humane Society. So what did he do before Vick was 1 month before Vick was released? On April 14, 2009, Limbaugh recorded his PSA. In it, he opens up by saying there's a new alliance between the Humane Society, between the Humane Society and law enforcement against dogfighting. So he comes out and shapes this partnership. And then, among other things, he says of dogfighters, street fighters, he called them street toughs, quote unquote, people like Michael Vick. So not only does he relabel Michael Vick, but he establishes a construct based on race and deviance for who law enforcement and the Humane Society should be targeted. But keeping in mind, as you noted, as we talked about, Vick's involvement in dogfighting was on the professional level. Most of the people involved on the professional level are not black, they're white. That's what my research showed. Yeah. So the rural communities, like you said, very apt observation. Sure. Vick wasn't arrested in the Ridley Place projects. He was arrested at his property in Smithville, Virginia, which is a rural community. Yet all the attention with the street fighters. So that was how race and deviance played out. Right. But Limbaugh's public service announcement was it. He spurred greater media coverage as well as greater law enforcement attention on street fighters. And that's what helped to account for. In fact, 70% of these arrests we're talking about occurred after Rush Limbaugh recorded his public service announcement. Wow. Incredible. 1 month before Vick was released. Vick was released in May of 2009.
Now, the thing is as well, we don't have a lot of time left.
Right.
But I want to also cover, there's another writer who had made some story, the black columnist out of Kansas City, as a matter of fact.
Cool.
You mentioned one of them. You mentioned Brian Burwell, but there's another one. I can't forget. For some reason,
Jason Whitlock.
Whitlock. Yeah.
How about that?
Whitlock. And I say that because Whitlock always sides on the right.
Okay, I hear that.
And I forget what he said during the Vick drama thing.
Terribly unfortunate. He came out, among others, and I believe perhaps he and Burwell got on the phone together. But as we said about how race and deviance was used with the Vick thing and this dogfighting thing, Whitlock, among others, and Burwell jumped on this bandwagon about rappers. He said that Vick's involvement in dogfighting was his attempt to emulate rap culture.
As if he did this in person and say, okay, more fans will buy my merchandise and everything, and if I get I'll get street cred if I kill these dogs.
Is that something?
Which he was trying to keep on the down low.
Exactly.
Okay,
how could he be interested?
Right.
In in trying to take that approach.
Right.
If in fact he's secretive
Yeah.
about it, he's
Right.
obviously not trying to promote the fact that he was in dogfighting.
Right.
So this idea about hip hop culture was wrong. Whitlock took that tack. So too did Brian Burwell. And in fact, Burwell noted that Vic, in this attempt to appeal to the sneaker buying public, and I asked the question: okay, if this was about the sneaker buying public, why didn't he mention anything about Nike? Nike produced a commercial in 2003, a footwear commercial that inferred a dogfighting match. Had two dogs lunging at each other as if they were in a dogfight. When the folks asked them, the protesters and animal rights activists asked Nike, why would you have an image of two dogs lunging at each other? Nike spokesman replied that they were doing this to, quote unquote, stay in touch with the urban market.
Right.
So Whitlock, Burwell, and others blamed rappers, but nobody talked about Nike. And Whitlock is questionable. He wrote some vicious things, and never once did he talk about how Vic has rebounded since.
Right. Oh, I remember Whitlock came. You remember that Diane Imus situation, and he's attacking.
Oh
the
yes,
girls,
he did. Vivian Stringer, the head coach of Rutgers, he criticized her.
Yeah, I could not. I said, how can you criticize Vivian Stringer? But that's Jason Whitlock. You know?
And then defended Imus, no less.
Yeah.
He said Imus should get his job back for the most self-serving reason. Because when I made a racist, as he said, I said some offensive to whites, you know, I got a second chance. That's very self-serving.
Exactly.
And to go to bat for Don Imus, no less, was very revealing about his personality and what he's about.
Yeah. Listen, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Hey, I want to thank you for having me.
This is amazing. Kenneth Robinson, this is his book. This is the man in the structure at Buffalo State, but from victim to victory. Okay. The fall and rise of Michael Vick.
Yes.
This is a very well written book, very well researched.
Wow.
Thank you all for watching Policy and Prejudice.
And
my name is Chris Stevenson. You have a safe week.
thank you, man. I really enjoyed it. I got